gonna die. You're kidding me right now.
Do you need a plug-in? We got cords and stuff.
It's recording. Okay.
Make it fast.
It's recording now.
Make it fast.
Okay. Well, Eleanor, I appreciate this opportunity to, share some of my truth with the youth, in hopes that maybe, as corny as it may sound, they don't have to do what I did, what a lot of us in this house have done, which is spend our adult lives through our addiction in penitentiaries, and missing out on a lot of the joy of life. So any opportunity I have to share my story with you or with a class of students. Cabrillo College is very important to me. I'm local. I was born and raised in Santa Cruz. In the 60s, my parents had moved up here in the 60s from Long Beach. My dad had played professional football and came here to coach at Cabrillo College.
Oh, wow.
So my dad was actually very involved in Cabrillo College from the 60s till the early 2000s. He was president of the athletic department. Don Montgomery, he was a football coach, a wrestling coach. He ran all the swim programs, life-saving, advanced life-saving, lifeguarding. He used to teach a surfing class in the 70s and scuba diving. So with that being said, I came from a very well-rounded, successful, a very community-based family. My mom was a teacher, Mel at Galt Elementary School for 30 years. Used to teach macrame in the 70s at Aptos junior high night class for people. They were hippies who didn't use drugs. They were in that era, they were just really good people. I grew up with Trent Dofer, was my neighbor. He became a professional athlete. He's my godbrother. So in a sense, I came from what was a very healthy environment. I grew up playing sports. I was a water polo player through Cabrillo College, honorable mention All-American. I was at 17.
Oh, wow.
And by 19, I was in prison through my drug addiction, through my choices. And there was nothing my family could do. So if it's nature or nurture, I don't really have an opinion on that. I was nurtured really, really well. I grew up surfing and spent every summer on Kauai, paddling out river canoes. I'm associated with really healthy people. No one was an alcoholic or an addict in my family. My grandfather was an alcoholic who committed suicide before I met him. So the skip generation things may be real. My mom suffered a lot of guilt behind that, and carried that with her for many years. Worried and guilt. Now, even though I was from this, what you could say like, perfect community and household at Aptos in the 70s, I was born in 68. I myself displayed signs of criminal behavior from a young age. I would get off the school bus and do burglaries for candy because we weren't allowed to have candy. I started behavior from crime as my parents didn't know, no one knew. I memorized routes, I memorized where people lived, and I knew where their families were at work, where they worked, and doors were unlocked then. And I would literally get off the bus at different bus stops knowing the trails that I could get home, and steal candy. I'd play with toys. I'd even steal clothes that I wanted. As a young child, my mom couldn't dress me. I had my own ideas of style, and I wanted the OPs and the Quicksilver and that stuff as a kid. And though I was provided for, my parents were teachers. I can remember feeling I never got what I wanted for Christmas, and yet I never wanted for much. I always wanted more. And so as a child, I learned how to go take that. I took that into my own hands. In my addiction, I was a virgin till 17 and way involved in drugs, from ecstasy. Aptos was like that. Cocaine, ecstasy, drinking. Any kind of drugs was available, and it was usually from our friends' parents.
I apologize.
That's okay. We're in an active social world these days. I myself love my phone. I waited for years in prison to have my phone, and I love social media, though it's dangerous for me because I overshare. I'm learning to filter in my boundaries. I get really angry. And it's very easy for me to lash out from my life experiences now at people on social media. New age gangster, lash out verbally with $5 words and then block them, you know, which is lame. But I find myself participating. That's a new form of social media violence for me.
Right.
You know, and it can be very hurtful. So my life is very much like an unbalanced conundrum. It's the yin and yang. I came from this family. I was groomed to success. My uncle was the basketball coach growing up at Stanford, and then the Warriors. They were last place when he was the coach. His name was Montgomery. My other uncle was a women's volleyball coach at San Jose State and USC. He played in the Pan Am Games. He was a stud, Dick Montgomery. My dad, I said, was an athlete. So I grew up with all these men in my life. I learned about the human body. I learned about what it's like to be successful. And I held myself at a high standard. Yet the beast of addiction for me, as soon as I got turned on to cocaine, there was nothing that could be done to stop me from getting what I wanted. And because of the way I was raised, I'd never held a $100 bill in my hand myself by the time I was asked to leave my home at 17. And I still deal with this resentment today because I was a child. I was a virgin. I was way into drugs. I had a communication problem with my mom and dad. Now my dad was gnarly. He could leave town and leave me at home, and he would find a match head if it was lit on our property in Aptos. He could literally come back, and we thought we were slick. So I couldn't get away with anything. So I was under a gun. I had an addiction problem that I really, really liked. I found freedom in my addiction, man. And all the cool kids were doing it in Santa Cruz. It seemed like a rite of passage for us.
Right.
How much you could do, how much you could drink, who had drugs. And it was like I said, again, back then it was people stealing drugs from their parents' safes and stuff. That's where we got high, really. The drugs were pretty good.
And they're readily available?
Readily available. I got high without having any money. Like I said, when I went out on my own and I was playing water polo at Cabrillo, I was 17. I'd never lived away from home. I'd never dealt with money. My rent was paid for while I went to school, but I didn't go to class. So even though I became honorably mentioned All-American, 17 years old, playing as a goalie at Cabrillo. And the funny, it's the same time that Warren Berry, the lieutenant for the Santa Cruz Police Department, was a friend of mine and has been a friend for years. I played water polo at Aptos. He played at Cabrillo, at Harbor. And we competed with each other. We knew each other. He went to Merced and studied law enforcement. I went to Cabrillo and flunked out, but that freshman year we played against each other. And his trajectory in life was that he's one of the top cops now and a good man. And mine was a convict. I was in prison. I have pictures to show you can take pictures of later of a youth in prison. I was a kid. I was a scared young kid, but I was big. I was good looking, and I was an athlete. This picture right here, is one of the earlier ones. Now I was in my 20s already. Pictures earlier than this, and it's a progression. It becomes a progression. Eventually, this was after doing 7 years, right here, you become a product of your environment. I became that guy. And for me, it was, I learned a lot about my family. I learned a lot about respect. I turned into a man in prison, but I turned into an angry man.
Did you feel like, it sounds like you were amongst a lot of people that were very successful.
Yes, I was.
And intelligent. Do you feel like you had to live up to their standards, or?
I've talked about this in the past. I always knew that I had the ability to do whatever I wanted and to support. But I think I was just a late bloomer.
Okay.
I think that it wasn't a fear. I almost naturally felt like when I had to take the SATs, I just like bombed the whole thing. I actually thought I was just going to be going to college.
Right.
I didn't really, to some degree, I lived in a fantasy world myself, that everything was going to be okay, because I was loved, I was liked, I was a cool kid. I was, now the guys that were the superstars in high school are all, bald and divorced and, their backs hurt and And I'm just like, I have to look for a bunch of stuff in my life that the penitentiary did do for me, because my health, my ability to write, my ability to endure some hardships,